Hello, everybody, and welcome to Café Muse. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for sharing your classical guitar with us in this photo slideshow. I am Henry Crawford, and I'll be co-hosting this evening with Luther Jett. Tonight, we will be featuring two poets, Ed Madden and Kevin McLellen, both of whose work has been selected by the WordWorks for the Hilary Tom Capital Collection. If we have time enough left after their readings, we'll present a brief Q&A, which will be led by WordWorks founder Karen Alanier. So let's begin with a few housekeeping items. During the reading, you may use the chat feature to comment on a poet's performance or comment in any way you like. Feel free to post a question, which we will try to get to if we have time. We've muted your microphones in order to avoid any interruption of the program. And please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. If you have difficulty hearing the poets, you can use Zoom's closed caption feature. To use it, look for the gray box at the bottom of your screen labeled CC. Click it and then choose Show Subtitles. Closed captions will appear at the bottom of your screen. Now, we encourage you to buy our poets' books, and we'll put a link into the chat that will send you to the site to do just that. And remember that Café Muse is a nonprofit organization with an all-volunteer team. We encourage you to donate to Café Muse to support its literary programs. And we'll put a donation link in the chat as well. Okay, so with all of that housekeeping done there, let me say that it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Ed Madden, a poet whose work brings us a perspective that displays a rural dynamism that is both traditional and contemporary. His rhythms and imagery reflecting his deep Southern roots. He is the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently, Apuka in Arkansas, selected by Timothy Liu for the Hilary Tom Capital Collection, and a Story of the City, which is a collection of poems from his work as the first poet laureate for Columbia, South Carolina. Ed Madden's poetry is remarkable for its imagery and emotional depth. In poems like Snake and Trough, he evokes the experience of his rural childhood with startling clarity, while taking on complex themes of family, identity, and memory. We'll find a tender, detailed account of caring for an aging parent next to poems of love and partnership with touching intimacy. He uses a wide array of natural elements to reflect on the passage of time, human relationships, and the beauty that is found in everyday moments. Ed Madden is a professor of English and former director of Women's and General Studies and Gender Studies at the University of South Carolina. Ed Madden was named an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow in 2019, and in 2022 received the South Carolina Governor's Award for the Arts. So for tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from a poet whose work resonates with the complexities of the human experience, from the fertile soil of his Arkansas childhood to the wider landscapes of identity, love, and loss. Ed Madden's poetry invites us to look closely at the world around us, to find the wonder in the ordinary, and to confront the challenging emotions that make us human. So, without any further ado, let me welcome Ed Madden. Come on in.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be reading from Apuka in Arkansas, the book that that was selected by WordWorks. I'm only going to read from this book. There's a kind of guiding spirit for the book, so I probably need to tell you what Apuka is. Sorry, I'm just fixing my view so I can see things better. Okay. To tell you what Apuka is, he's a goblin. He's a shapeshifter. He's a trickster. It comes from Irish American folklore, Irish folklore, I mean. I grew up Irish American, so I'm fascinated with Irish folklore. And this particular figure he's not evil, he's not good, he's just a trickster. And as a shapeshifter, he can show up as a horse or frequently as a horse in folklore. He shows up as a horse on the road and abducts you and takes you places you don't want to go. He can be a dog. If you've seen the old movie Harvey, he's a rabbit. That's a puka in that movie. Um, I guess I was thinking, what better figure for a closeted gay kid in rural fundamentalist culture than a shapeshifter? Always trying to change your shape to fit in the different contexts you don't understand. And at the same time, I wanted to put together poems that are about encounters with human or non-human animals that take us places we don't want to go. So there's a poem, for example, in the book for my fitness trainer, as well as poems for my therapist as well. I'm going to start with the title poem. It's called A Puka in Arkansas. Uh, the book I had written before this was called Ark, and it was about taking care of my dad when he was dying of cancer, helping with his home hospice care. Um, and if you've been through that, you know how it changes you. And I guess even after the book was done, I kept writing about that experience. So this is the poem A Puka in Arkansas. My dad was dying. He had been dying for weeks. I went for a walk down the old road beside the family home, the sun declining in the distant trees. Be careful, my mother said. There are wolves in the fields. She said she had seen the tracks. I used the walk to phone my love back home, the man they didn't know, refused to know, a name they never used. The nearest field was fringed with what the combines left behind of last year's harvest, threaded now with insects and weeds. Tractors would plow it all down soon enough, and death would be here too, soon. On the road ahead, a small dog trotted just beyond me. The wind picked up, I tucked my phone away. No one headed out or home, no one on the road, just the dog. It paused, looked back as if to ask, how far do you think we'll go tonight? The poem that opens the book is called When I Was a Young Animal. When I was a young animal, I learned by watching others, my father and the other men, my mother closing the door. The field smelled like a field. I didn't know that then. I could smell my young uncle on his hand-me-down shirts and pants, the buckskin coat with fringed sleeves, smell my grandmother's home when I tugged them on. On the farm, we were a pack, the other cubs and me, roaming the dirt roads and fields, slinging clods at cars and one another, pissing on anything, into the fire they built behind the shop to burn the trash, the small cans exploding in the flames. We were sunburnt, sugar bit. Our mothers checked our skin for ringworm and ticks. I was a young animal. I learned by watching others. I wrote a couple of poems. I should say I went off for a retreat at Hambidge in rural Georgia, in the mountains of Georgia, when I was working on this book. And there in that darkness, I got kind of obsessed. So I wrote a lot of poems about the puka and instructions on what to do if you actually met him on the road. And a couple of those found their way into the book. So this is instructions on meeting the puka. 1, don't go out on the old roads by yourself. That is where, that is when. Sometimes a man, sometimes a horse. If it has golden eyes, if it speaks, it is never, it is always. If you have spurs, then, if you don't, then. Some of us were made to be ridden, riddled, riven. Never mind your mother, it says, keep your hold. Never mind whether you do or don't, it says, I will make you know. Sometimes a dog, a pig, sometimes a bear. If the frost has silvered the blackberries, if they've spit on what you want, sometimes the necessary task, sometimes a story you've heard before. Come with me, it says, and I will bring you home. Sometimes a lie, sometimes the truth, sometimes a man with the head of a goat. He will give you gold coins, nothing but green leaves. He will teach you new songs. They won't make sense back home. But you know how. now. I should say about this poem, the puka famously pisses on the blackberries beside the road at the end of the summer because they're his after that. And sometimes he does your chores for you unless you ask him to. And then, of course, he runs away. This is a poem called Silent Caller Dorm Telephone. I did some work with the Queer Archives here in South Carolina and also a workshop with the Queer Archives in Ireland. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that the early helplines, there were a lot of hangups. And you sort of wonder what they are. You sort of wonder if people are calling and just hanging up to be mean. But what they probably were people before cell phones, back when you had one phone in the house and everyone could hear, or a public phone. You called and you might get interrupted, but you also just might be too scared to say anything. And sometimes you had to call 2 or 3 times before you got the courage to talk. And so I thought about that and told my own story. So Silent Caller, Dorm Telephone, Arkansas, 1985. Like any other Sunday, he bought the newspaper on his way back from church. And after lunch, he spread it out on the small bed in the room he shared with a friend. There was a story about a new church, an address, a number. He turned the page face down, tucked it under the others, afraid the roommate would see. Later, he wrote a short letter. I think I might be. My parents wouldn't. I don't have anyone to. He got a reply, recognized the return address in the campus mailroom, waited until he was alone. There was a man's name, a number. He hid the letter in a book on the shelf above his desk. He waited. He doesn't remember how long he waited, the letter hidden. One afternoon, when no one was in, he walked down the hall to the dorm phone at the corner of 2 corridors. There was a chair. He didn't sit. He called the number. Hello? He hung up. He stood there a moment, listening. There was a radio going somewhere. To change this lonely life. Foreigner. I want to know what love is. It was so quiet. He could hear every word. He picked it up, dialed again. I retell a lot of fairy tales and then I just make up some fairy tales. And they all had different titles when I was first putting the book together. And then I just thought, fuck it, they're all fairy tales. So this one's called Fairy Tale. What he wore that day was darkness, a silver shimmer of teeth, spit threading his words, the sour of dried sweat and dog fennel and yellow leaves, and nothing like what they'd said, though we'd heard the story before, how he lingered and where, the door where little boys disappeared, pull the bobbin and the latch will go up. And there he was, watching me, all loose and lizardy and worn-out jeans, his lean and lank, the silvery trees, a path fizzling out and animal trails, just instinct and smell, and me no longer a boy. He stood, said nothing, bog-moist and rust-worn, a bolt and a grin, thick and itchy, and it was there and then, and wind on bare skin, neck bristle and stiffen, red shirt on a limb, a way to make do. And something or someone to sink your teeth into. Instructions on meeting the puka, number 2. There is never only one wolf. You are no longer a child. You are no longer a boy or a girl. The forest is where. The old road is where. In the dark, you are only flesh. In the absence of light, touch, ripple of muscle, hide, fur, spurs. In the absence of light, scent of piss, the stiff pong of sweat. Becoming is always other than filiation. There is never only one wolf. In the absence of light, sound, a throat raw with want. In the absence of light, tongue, swallow what you don't yet know. The boy will not come back the same. The boy will not come back. Go outside. Close the door. There are a few tiny poems that have no titles that I use as section breaks through the book, and I want to read one of those. This is actually one that they painted on a stencil on the sidewalk outside our local library, which is kind of cool. I'm going to read it twice since it's so tiny. What has been omitted from the history we learned? The stubble was plowed under, sometimes burned. What has been omitted from the history we learned? The stubble was plowed under, sometimes burned. Another fairy tale, called, of course, Fairy Tale. What you thought was a wolf was not a wolf. It was your father, mother, brother. You did not remember what big teeth they had, what claws. When your father died, the wolf was at the door ready. The wolf wanted you. The wolf wanted you to love what you couldn't have. The wolf made you beg. The wolf made you hard. The wolf said, good boy. The wolf said nothing. What you thought was a wolf was not a wolf. The wolf was a darkness beyond the fence. Once there was a boy who left his door unlocked to ask you to bring a friend and hold him down. You did this. Later, after it was over, he thanked you. Later, a year or so after, you heard he died, a heart attack, and no one found him for days. What you thought was a wolf was not a wolf. The wolf is in the mirror. The wolf is at the door. The door is unlocked. The wolf is a man sleeping, surrounded by flowers. He smells better than you remember. If you kiss the wolf, he will wake up. This is one of the poems for my therapist. I also have some retold psalms in here. Psalms, in case my Arkansas accent's too thick to understand what I'm saying. A psalm. So this one, I like taking texts that are like the syntaxes and structure and images are part of the language of my brain, part of the language and culture I grew up in. So this is Psalm 23. The 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, rewritten for my therapist. So Psalm after Psalm 23. Tim is my therapist. I am learning to trust him. He motions me to the green sofa. There's always bottled water on the table. He leads me to talk about things I don't want to talk about. If I make my way to the top of the dark stairs, he makes a space for talking and for not talking. Sometimes the room gets crowded. My dead father, my distant mother, all those messages from my brother I can pull up right there on my phone. In their presence, he asked, what would happen if you stopped doing your family's work of shaming you? That question follows me the rest of the day. Another poem about my therapist, All You Can Do. The nature of daylight that afternoon was a kind of clarity. It resolved the street, the line of the sidewalk, the shadows outside the cinema, the courthouse. That was the first day I left the therapist office since I started. Was it 2 months, 3? That I felt better after the visit. A woman was speaking loudly on her phone. All you can do is the best you can do. I wanted to take that as a sign. I wanted to remember what she said. The daylight thinned to heat in the windows of the office. What I thought was what I thought, whether true or not. Students and parents of students were packing cars on the hot street, moving out, moving on. The therapist asked, do you think you've been trying to earn a place in your family? When I was walking back, I heard a woman talking on her phone. By the time I got back, I couldn't remember what the woman said. Was it, all you can do is the best you can do? Or, the best you can do is all you can do? Surely the difference matters. I'm going to read 2 more poems, I think. One very angry and then one very happy. That seems like a good way to end a reading. So first, the angry one. It's called Not the One. I am not the son you wanted. I am not the brother you wanted. I am not a birthday on the calendar. I am not a photo on your wall. I am not a postcard you will answer. I am not listed in your phone. I am not on the right side. I am not in the pulpit. I am not in the pew. I am not how you imagined it would go. I am not a story you can tell. I am not the latest news. I am not who you thought I was. I am not the way it should be. I am not the moral of the story. I am not riddled with guilt. I am not covered in sores. I am not unaware of the irony. I am not the difference between then and now. I am not in your Venn diagram. I am not a good fit. I am not good. I am not good enough. I am not at the wedding. I am not dearly beloved. I am not the circle of life. I am not an uncle. I am not a place at the table. I am not a vase of flowers. I am not a mylar balloon. I am not just driving through. I am not just stopping by. I am not around much. I am not someone you asked to stay, though you did once so I could help. I'm not trying to earn my place. I'm not obedient. I'm not telling you what you want to hear. For years, I was a folded note in my father's wallet that he didn't know whether to send, and then he sent it. I'm not responding to that last text message you sent over a year ago. I'm not someone who writes home anymore. I'm not someone who goes home anymore. I'm not stuck in the past. I'm not letting go of the past. I'm not very rational about this. I'm not this. I'm not that. I'm not one of those or one of them. I'm not one of us. I'm not one of you. I'm not handsome. I'm not wholesome. I'm not holy. I'm not coming home. And then for the last one, I'm going to read this, the last poem in the book. It's called My Husband Who Is Not My Husband. And before I read it, just again, thanks to all you people at Cafe Muse and for WordWorks for making this reading and making this book possible. My Husband Who Is Not My Husband. And also, before I read it too, just how grateful I am to be reading with Kevin. It's been fun to read him with him over the past year or two. My husband who is not my husband. His priestly gestures consecrating the broken eggs, hands moving over the stove, slabs of meat skittering in grease, drop biscuits big as a cat's head threaded with cheese. Him making the fountain, making lantana, acanthus, making bloom and ripple song, making the birds. My husband, the blue room, the bright room, best china, best silver lifted from a box in the closet, its red beds of best silver put back later for later. My husband, who is not my husband, who is still mine. See him crying in the Dublin airport. He doesn't want you to see. Can you see the eucomas, its waxy leaves, its stalk blossoming in the hot sun, pushing up among the marigolds? Scars from this or that on shin or back, wrist or hand, the way the garden loves him, the bees, him among the lilies, his hands lilies, his mouth a twist of quince, his scent, my husband among the lilies, my husband sauntering down the aisles, him sauntering down the aisles at the flea market, dust settling on everything, his small flashlight, his blue eyes, his sound of geese, a train, look. Something glitters and is gone, my husband, the gold in the trees falling, and him a coverlet of mulch across the beds, or asleep, the heat of him, the hot water bottle of him, the cat purring at our feet. My husband, who is not my husband, who is still mine. The blue walls say so, the orchid deciding to bloom again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's give a big zoom hand to Ed Madden. All right, thank you. Okay, now, Luther Jet, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Henry. Hi, I'm Luther Jett, and it's my pleasure to introduce Kevin McLellen. Kevin is the author of In Other Words, You /Mark, which was the winner of the WordWorks 2022 Hillary Tom Capital Collection, selected by Timothy Liu. His other books include Ornithology, Tributary, Round Trip, the book Objects, Hemispheres, and Bracketed Box, those book objects reside in several special collections, including the Blue Star Collection at Harvard University. Kevin is also a video artist. His most recent book, Sky, Pond, Mouth, was just released this past spring, and Kevin lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Tonight, Kevin will be reading selections from both In Other Words, You and Sky, Pond, Mouth. The latter book, Sky Pond Mouth, has been described as a book that doesn't take much for granted. Boundaries, solidity, distinctions between plants and humans, lasting companionship, faith, enduring self, health. In the long poem, Winterberries, Kevin writes, "The wind made the light and an ash tree seem one, animated yet mortal, and then it ceased. For a moment, I thought the statue in the park was me, not of me. Sometimes one needs to tell someone to go away." And Timothy Liu described In Other Words You as a sequence of clear meditations which are both directly addressed to and overheard by a beloved you who is unspecified, whose identity shifts like a puka. Is it the self, the reader, another entirely? Kevin sings of longing and desire, using images fractured by the passage of time to conjure moments of emotional panic and sadness. Overall, In Other Words You is reverent and contemplative work. As Gabrielle Cavalcaresi wrote, this book is vulnerable, hopeful, and in every way human. Kevin McLellan's In Other Words You travels the riparian border country between elegy and celebration to remind us that in spite of everything, the world goes on somehow. And we go on. Please welcome Kevin McLellen.
Thank you, Luther, for such a lovely introduction. And thank you, Henry, for organizing us, and Karen for your commitment to poetry and for so long. Thank you so much. And let me start my timer. Just one quick note. I'm pleased to announce that I have an appointment for cataract surgery. But what that means is that my last reading, which was live broadcast from a bookstore, it was the first time I actually wasn't able to, well, I was able to read, but I had to leave the stage and read with the book held up to the ceiling. So it was more like performance art. That shouldn't be a problem here. I have many devices. One and two, and then I also have my phone, which has a flashlight, and usually, something works. So I'm going to read from two books. In Other Words You, which I'm so thankful was published by the WordWorks. And then, much to my surprise, very soon after that publication, this book was published, Sky Pond Mouth, and within 13 months, I had two books released, which was kind of crazy. Don't do that. Okay, so we'll start with In Other Words You. And what you need to know is that there are three kinds of poems in this manuscript. There are the slash poems, which you will not necessarily experience as I read them. There are erasures that are from texts about the earth or weather. And I just what the language that remains is like bodily. And then there are also these Dear You poems, which are set to music. So you'll hear a little bit of each of these. Dialectical. And again, I'll be looking down so that I can see, but I'll look up after, I promise. Dialectical. A wheel in you stopped turning. Death, a caught word. Your eyes, a window. Clouds wait for the first spring thunderstorm to clear the palate. Can't decide if you'll stay indoors. Seems premature to imagine the parsley missing ground. Summer's either a portal or a container. Yes, clouds. A turning word caught in the wheel looks you in the eye. Counting backwards. Your impatience for a response and an unwillingness to identify one remains. In other words, if you took delirium, no one would find you. A poor historian, alert like a mockingbird at nightfall. The incessant assorted notes. Chatter, the form of waiting and overexposure. Not an anthem. Any use of we feels self-serving or assaultive. In other words, you would like his heart inside of you, though his disinterest. Instead, adopt what he said. Each work has its own imperatives. Or did he say each word? Further proof we are unreliable narrators. What I'm realizing about this book, and it's obviously way too late, is that I think that these slash poems want to be a very long poem. And I have been writing in the direction of length lately, and also screenplays. And so it's just interesting how like I have like a new like, I don't know, they seem very short to me, but they all collectively like add up to something. But I want that something to be together. So maybe in the maybe if I ever have a new and selected or something. Intrinsic. The present will break down easily, will feed a memory landfill. You consider the torso's pulse points as you walk into oncoming traffic. The language of almost. Almost aligns with all other instances. In your mind, these instances create an irregular perforation. There must be more to you than a dotted fault line. Must stop focusing on pairs, torsos, pairs of torsos. You see a shadow, yes. You're hardwired to your phantom, yet you know the railroad will continue to muscle the people and those vile portmanteaus. Earthquakes and volcanoes. Deformation. An empty space is left to be filled. Weak shaking. Eruption. Heat transfer. Other fluids within. Thrust. Allowing. It's one of the erasure poems. After leaving. Dear you, bought the CD at Sonic Boom. After I looked for salmon, Chinook. Instead saw apparitions of them ghosting the ladders. Then flippered pinball. I passed on the sensory deprivation tank, and the museum was closed. When is me? Sorry about all the questions here. Later I write the rock, water molecules, the body's always different. The baton. Unnoticed or unseen, so a baton. With no handoff. You believe inadvertent. The art of being unaware until now. On tenterhooks, your skin. Interchange the words art and act. Must not run, must climb water. July. Your mother's mother passed this year. Wait a second. I'm not going to read this one. It's not the vibe that I'm going for. Listening to Max Richter's The Departure on repeat. Dear you, I overheard the botanist say to high schoolers at the public gardens, look behind the flower for the swollen base. It took my breath away, and a young woman in the periphery of her peers noticed. She continued to look without it feeling like a stare, as if I was standing in shallow quicksand. I didn't feel shame at first, then walked away and only looked back once. I imagined myself just before out of sight. Furthermore, Under Pressure, the song by David Bowie and Freddie Mercury or Queen. Dear you, we are all definitions of record and recording. I might even be human. Would you like to accompany me for a tahini brown butter donut after a brisk walk at Mount Auburn's? Or perhaps a cheese and pickle sandwich with some warm broth and a thermos we share and a potter's field on the other side of the state? Please remember we have yet to meet. So that's a Dear You poem that's at the end, which is information because you're questioning like who the you is throughout until you get near the end, and the you is the speaker has not met the you. But at the same time, some of the you poems are self-reflexive. But do we really know ourselves? This is what the book is about. This is the last poem I'll read from this book, Concerning the Storm. That the wind won't put the door back, that the door was a flap, that it won't leave you content, that you're forced to stay indoors, that you're seen as a sad clerk, that you sell used bird cages, poems too, that the flea market is closed, that you want to know there's more to this than body, that perhaps they're right after all, that you decided to not leave during the storm, that the storm began when you began. So now Sky Pond Mouth. And I will start with the opening poem, Ecosystem. Here a valley, here the likelihood of wind, a catalog of matter, the findings not unlike double negatives. I look for answers from the wellspring, find this collision of monosyllables, the sky on top of the pond. These words must mean something. In a mirror, my face becomes a run-on sentence, and the syntax of eyes requires translation. These parallel mirrors take in and emit, transmit a series of unique frequencies, each slightly different from the previous, like a series of movie frames or DNA strands. They know things despite their connectedness. My body's ear detects their signals, yet the lack of awareness is mine. Imagine a ripe carrot propelling itself out of the ground, or a snail leaving its cornucopian dome. Imagine the I don't want to die motivation we wake up to each morning. Imagine a sky on top of a pond in a valley. Here, low clouds, like winter lily pads, hang with their half submerged thoughts. Thank you. Clouds. I feel like I've had like 18 cups of coffee and I have not had any today. What is going on? I'm so motivated by you all. Clouds. The rope whips against the flagpole. I miss hearing him say we, yet I wasn't the one. Yes, he was thinking about someone else, and I looked to the sky. Painters need to know the sky, always a witness, and birds too, realists, yet we often don't pay them any attention. Did you hear me? I was in love for 5 minutes, and then the pond stretched out inside my chest. A definition of loss. The mouth of the cave is hungry, which is why I bear why a bear with a mouth hole lives here. All the moss outside the cave, all the trees. All the trees here have mouth holes too. The trees, holes, an orchestra, and I, a soloist, so a concerto. Though I am not sure if I am heard. Inversely, the wind, an invisible bow, forces tree language. There's a bottle here on the forest floor. The winds in the bottle create a concerto, which is heard. The mouth of the canyon yawns again, but not out of boredom. Another kind of music. The mouth of the sky. The mouth of the sky is vast, and everything around it evasive, especially clouds. So those poems were in the first section. I want to sort of get a little bit further into the book here. I'm going to skip quite a bit of territory. There's an obsession with repetition in this book, and you're going to hear a few of those. A housefly. The housefly on the glass. The housefly on the glass cover. The glass cover on the pie plate holding part of a pie. I stare at what remains of the pie, the exposed insides made from the insides of apples. The fly on the glass cover flies away, and I feel lost. Again, I feel lost, and I am looking at glass. Then around the room. The room is small. The room knows. The room knows me better than most. My eyes. I am looking through the glass, not at a fly, nor at glass, or pie, or part of one. At a tree trunk. I am looking at a tree trunk. Sunlight, the wind, sunlight and the shadows on itself, the leaves on itself. Monica de la Torre facilitated this amazing workshop on repetition, which I just happened to take around the time that I was writing these poems. And I don't know, it was one of the most remarkable studies I've ever had. It was a one-day thing, and it just has stayed with me. Look her up. She's amazing if you're interested in repetition. Monica de la Torre. She was teaching at Brown. I don't know where she is now. The blue vehicle. I am looking at the blue vehicle parked out front. I am blue. But I am parked inside during work hours. Parked inside during daylight. I am not shiny nor electric blue like the vehicle parked out front. Who sees me when I am out front? I am between Navy and midnight. Somewhere between Navy and midnight, the week before daylight savings time. We are different models, different years. I wheel the streets with all the others, going at different speeds, different places. We are going to different places, different shades. I am as visible as midnight blue. I am midnight blue and it is dusk. I am not noticeable. I am midnight and I am out front. You need to get a deep breath here because this one travels fast. It's similar to your fast poem, Ed. This is titled James Schuyler to John Ashbery. We are tentative. We are tentatively looking. Landscapes unknown. We are tentatively looking for landscapes unknown to us. Our window is a square. Our window is a beautiful, unlatched, square picture window, and we are tentatively looking. Our window is ours, not the powers that be, and is beautiful and unlatched, and we are beautiful and not unlatched, and we are tentatively looking to not feel a bit disturbed or troubled. We have the light on, and then do not. First, we have the light on for the people, and then we have it off for ourselves. No, ourselves is a lie, for there is always darkness. We have the direction of darkness, so ourselves is a lie when we have the light on. And the darkness is your yellow cardigan, and our window is a square. A square, yes, a square. And your yellow cardigan is in the darkness from your beautiful, unlatched, square picture window. Your yellow cardigan is shrouding. We are tentatively looking towards landscapes that do not give us any indication of the other. Tentatively, yes, tentatively looking. We are in a beautiful square picture window, but neither unlatched nor green. Not very distracted or troubled, really. We are merely tentative and can be seen with the light on in the direction of darkness. And I'm going to read I'm going to read a prose poem, and then I'm going to read the first section of the long poem, Winterberries. There are 4 long poems in this book, and I could just read one of them for this time, but that's not, I don't feel like that's a good use of the time, so I'll just read one section of that. A myth. Either way, they will need to organize the road closing over the next few rainy nights to determine if this water is a small pond or a vernal pool. A scientist collects evidence. After disturbances, and there are plenty, their heart beats slow. This species can be found across the forehead of open woods near water, solitary along forest edges, or on the underside of fruit, cashews, dates, and figs. They are attracted to golden tints, and for this reason alone, they're vulnerable. Other than the position of the head, there are no distinct characteristics. In some lifestyles, like theirs, the rump gives signals. In opposition to popular opinion, their openings must not be blocked. Winterberries. 1. My thoughts have no place to go except more inward. I focus on the frozen river. Those I don't allow to reach me. The boat is a liar and I will not listen. Kites are also liars. Never mind, I know who I am. Male, female, and neither. I judge indecision and refusal. Long live the queen also means the king is dead. In other words, I'm a eunuch, and I'm looking to the river. Dare I say the viaduct is arrhythmic? I'd tell the engineers, but they are too busy talking among themselves. Somewhere there's an ocean, a wellspring, and in the in-between, a pulse. I talk to myself, so a thinness of skin, a galaxy with dangling lights, each bulb in a glass enclosure, yet assembled together and hanging at fixed heights. No, think from the floor upward. Consider ferns. The walls inside inform the walls outside, as if an alkaline substance coats their sensors. Consider oneself. Ask generations, the emotionality in cells. My back is to the valley because I need to be taken by surprise. Might be the only way to be reached. The alabaster core of my spiral. The indoor window faces another indoor window. I must find the pressure points because the hair of a monster sometimes appears on the back of my coat. Thank you very much for listening to all of that. Oh, and I want to thank Lisa Lewis, who is here, who wrote one of the blurbs for this recent book and is also a WordWorks author. Meg Kearney, amazing woman who runs the MFA program, the Solstice MFA program. Thank you so much for being here, Meg. And Cynthia Barger, I love you so much. I can't wait to see you.
Thank you, Kevin. I think we have time for a little bit of Q&A. So please take it away, Karen.
Thank you, Luther, and thank you, Ed, and thank you, Kevin. I was thinking that I would like you both to talk about reality versus the supernatural and the definition of what is reality and where your influences come from. You both write very differently, but you're both very intensely engaged with things that are seen or not seen. So how about if you start, Ed, and see what you can come up with relative to that theme?
That's a tough question. You know, growing up, sorry, this is going to sound, it might sound kind of hokey, but growing up fundamentalist Christian, you grow up thinking of the spiritual world all around you in some ways. I mean, maybe not in the not in superstitious ways, but it's part of who you are. And then when you lose that faith, you're still thinking of the numinous in the world around you, even if it's not the same. I mean, that's kind of why I loved like a poem like the Psalm for my therapist, like that it's displacing that religious energy, and I want to say religious there rather than spiritual, but displacing that religious energy into a relationship that's here, that's now, that is in a material world, but it's also still a relationship that's full of possibility, full of things that didn't happen and things that could have happened, right? And full of places you could go and places you don't want to go. Um, I don't know. I mean, I do think in many ways, because of the kind of church I grew up in, and I say this because we're about to do a big artwork and reading here for our Pride Month next week. And we're doing an ecumenical service next Thursday, and they asked me to read for it, and I thought, I don't know what to read. I sort of want to get up in the pulpit and read Not the One, and that may be what I do. But I guess
Mm.
I'm very conscious of the ways that I still have that drive for the invisible, to use your word. But it is absolutely tethered to the world I'm in.
I think that was a really good answer. And I really think that the connection to your upbringing in, the church that you were in, and how that still reflects in a way how you deal with things that are around you. And Kevin, you're all very much a philosopher in the way that you see things. There's a certain defining you bring in the obscure, but it's very tactile. And so, what are your influences relative to that?
These are really great questions, and I think that I have to circumnavigate them because I'm not. I think I have to circle those questions, and I think that this information adds up to something. Hopefully, um, I'm thinking about how um, I was not a person of faith with a capital or a lowercase f. But illness has forced me to face faith. I think that that's one part of this investigation. I feel like I'm investigating what it is to be human. I'm looking for evidence in the world. And I think that my work originally started off as autobiographical because I didn't necessarily have a practice or a process for writing. But I've come across this new process for writing, relatively new process for writing, some of which are in Sky Pond Mouth, where the information, I make the information autobiographical. Meaning I have a Word document that has a list of information that comes from preoccupations, whether it's overheard dialogue, whether it's something I've read that I need to respond to, whether it's a word that I have to use, whether, I mean, I don't know, like it's just but we each of us have preoccupations, and we are looking for things to sort of like understand our preoccupations. And so I just trust this. And so I use this information as a starting point to arrive somewhere I have no idea where I'm going. But I have my life that has led me to where I've gone. And so it's very much, the process of my writing is very much has become the way in which I'm trying to live my life. I hope that that was a clear.
Yes, and I think the key word for you is investigation, because I really felt that that was what you do with your work in the two selections from those two books, was an investigation. Whereas Ed is more a storyteller in the mythological, fantastic arena. And so anyway, thank you very much. I think it was a really interesting mix of, realities here.
Well, I think I will close out. So
Oh, okay.
thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Kevin. Our next Cafe Muse is Monday, November 4th, eve of something very important, I think. And we will be featuring Henry Crawford, which is why I'm closing and not Henry. We'll be featuring Henry and E. Ethelbert Miller. And this will be a hybrid event. It will be broadcast live from Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland. And it will also be accessible via Zoom, so you can tune in wherever on the planet you are. Once again, thanks to our poets, Kevin McLellen and Ed Madden. Thanks also to Michael Davis for his classical guitar, and to Henry Crawford for the video work and photography this time. Thanks to our many individual donors for underwriting this event, and finally, thanks to the entire Cafe Muse team. That includes me, along with Ellen Cole, Henry Crawford, Maj Dagama, Renee Garrity, Claire McGough, and of course, WordWorks founder and leader, Karen Alinier. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care, be well, vote.